Welcome to the Intentional Father Podcast, where us fathers parent our children, not by accident, but with intent. I'm your host, Aaron Stroman.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 3, Obedience. This is a fun topic to talk about. Not always fun to live out, but worthwhile living out. Obedience. We all want obedient children. So how do we do that? As fathers, how can we gain obedient children? Why do we want that? Well, here, let me give you why. First of all, when children are obedient, children are happy. When children are obedient, mommy's happy. And when children are obedient, daddy's happy. So obedience leads to happiness across the family. It leads to safety and security. It leads to a stable home. So let's talk about obedience. A lot of what I'm going to share today is coming from this idea found in the ancient scriptures, the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And it says this: children, obey your parents. So right there, this whole idea of obedience dates back thousands and thousands of years. Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on earth. And then check out verse 4, special instruction for fathers. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. So we're talking about obedience. There's this expectation the scriptures have for children to be obedient. And there's also this little extra note that scripture gives to fathers. So we're going to unpack it. And the way I like to talk about this is, imagine there's a spectrum for fathers, this fatherhood spectrum. And on one side is a lion, on the other side is a lamb. We want to fall in the middle of that spectrum, be in the perfect balance between a lion and a lamb. What do I mean when I say lion and lamb? What is a lion? King of the jungle, top apex predator, carnivore, right? It kills other animals and eats them for food. Blood all over it. It's violent. Hear me roar. Dominant. It's a force to be reckoned with. What is the lamb? The lamb is gentle. It's this animal that you would let your children interact with at the petting zoo. The lamb is vegan, right? It only eats plants. As fathers, we need to be a lion and a lamb. We need to find that perfect balance in between the two. So let's talk about this spectrum and how we can fall on here. Because and as fathers, we will tend to lean towards one end of that spectrum or the other. We tend to be either very nurturing and caring and soft, or we tend to be very harsh and strong and domineering. And so there's this middle space that we want to land. So what are the good traits of being a lion as a father? And what do we need to bring to the table from the lion perspective? First of all, expect obedience from your children. Expect obedience. Children want to live up to their parents' expectations. So let's expect our children to be obedient. Once we start expecting obedience, they will become obedient fairly quickly. So if you're watching this and you're thinking like, man, maybe I've waited too long. Maybe my kids are a little older, because they're most formidable in between birth and like 2 years, maybe 3 years old. But if you miss that window, it's not too late. You can still instill obedience into your children by expecting it. Now, I know this isn't the social norm. The social norm is for parents to obey their children, right? A lot of children boss their parents around and they're running the show. And left to their own vices, that's how it will go down. That's human nature. But They're children. They're not adults. They're children. They're not the parents. It is not their role or their place to expect obedience from their parents. And we as men need to, again, be men of integrity, back to episode 1. And we need to be more mature than our kids. We need to be the leaders of the family. Therefore, we can expect obedience from our children. So the expectation for obedience, first of all, if this is new for you, here's what you do. You sit your family down. You have a little family meeting. You don't do this in the heat of a moment when things are tense, when you're asking one child to do something and they're being disobedient. No. You proactively do this when there's no drama in the moment. You sit down your family and say, hey, here's a new expectation. We're expecting you to be obedient to your parents, whether you're a single parent or if your wife is there as well. You sit everyone down and say, we're starting something new. It hasn't always been like this. It's going to be a little bit of change. You're going to push back against it. We understand it, but the new expectation is obedience. So have that conversation. If your kids are too young to have that conversation, then you're at a prime opportunity where you can just simply expect your children to obey. Now, with this, one of the biggest mistakes I see from this, parents say they want their kids to obey, and they want their kids to be obedient quickly. And part of my obedience expectation, and this is how I articulate it with my kids, I expect immediate obedience. Immediate obedience. So it doesn't mean you take out a stopwatch and if you haven't responded within my command, 10 seconds, you're in trouble. But parents, you shouldn't have to repeat yourself. And you certainly shouldn't have to give a countdown or a time frame. This is the biggest mistake I see. And I know you've seen it too. You see it at the stores, at the church, out in social environments. Children are goofing around doing something, and the parents say, hey, it's time to go. And the kid doesn't leave. Or, hey, put that down. Hey, there's a command given by a parent, and the child doesn't obey. So what does a parent do? They repeat themselves. I said, do I need to tell you 3 times? They repeat themselves. And then they do this countdown thing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And maybe around 1 or 0, the child jumps into action and starts to obey. But don't count. If you start counting, you're teaching your child that it's okay to delay their obedience. Bad idea. That's not what we want. We want instant obedience. So I'll share a story on this lion side of what instant or immediate obedience looks like. So many times I've had company over, and my kids know I'm having company over, right? We've cleaned up the house a little bit, and I've told them, as soon as the company gets over, you're putting your toys away, and if there's a movie on the DVD player, the TV's being turned off. That's not how we host. It's not part of hospitality. So they get that. Company shows up. I'll tell my kids, hey, Cajun Joe's, please turn off the TV, put away your toys. And then I start greeting my company guests, and we start hosting. We start doing the hospitality thing. I can't tell you the number of times that people have said, oh my goodness, you just told your kids to clean up your toys and they did that without throwing a fit. I mean, man, I have to fight my kids. Or I've even had parents without children yet comment on it. Man, my brother's kids, they don't obey like that. But what are you doing? Because we're going to have kids and we want our kids to obey like that. And for me, it's normal. There's that expectation there. As soon as you have that expectation, kids will live up to it. And again, if your kids are older and this isn't a part of your family culture, they'll pick it up after 3 or 4 times of reinforcing it. But it brings such joy to a family when the children are obedient, the expectations are there, and they obey. Now, with that immediate obedience, there has to be an immediate consequence if they don't obey. And again, make sure the punishment fits the crime. So if the kids don't put away their toys when I've asked them to, guess what? I'm going to put them away, in a bag and they're going in my room and they're grounded. Those toys are taken away for a week. Or if the TV's on, the kids don't turn off the TV and they're mesmerized by it. Guess what? That DVD, which that kind of dates how old my kids are, but we had DVDs back in the day when they were younger. DVDs going away for a week. You don't get to watch that one, or maybe the TV goes away for a couple days. Again, there has to be that immediate consequence to match when the immediate obedience is not followed through on. So that's on the lion side. Just simply expect it. Now, you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to rule with the iron fist. That's why we need the lamb side of the spectrum. And fathers, it's easier for us, typically, this is stereotypical, it's easier for us to be on the lion side than the lamb side, but we need to find that perfect balance. So what can we bring to the table as a lamb? First of all, remember that they're children. They're not fully grown adults yet. Even Jocko on his podcast was talking about how he was expecting way too much out of his 6-year-old, and he's just a kid. So remember that you have children. Okay, remember you have children, and they're just more fragile. They're not fully developed. Their brains aren't functioning at 100% yet. We need to be gentle with them. So we don't need to rule with the iron fist because I said so. What's the saying? Don't be an authoritarian, but be authoritative. That's another way of saying, hey, land in this middle section on this spectrum. You don't want to be an authoritarian where you're the dictator and you just, whatever you say goes, and there's no real reasonable give and take there. We don't want to do that, but we do need to parent with authority because we are the authority. Let me give you a story to help illustrate this point. I gave you the story earlier. My kid's cleaning up when company comes over. That's a success. I'll share a story out of my failure. My kids were little, I don't know, 4 or 5 and 6. My son's 1 year younger than my daughter. They were wrestling in the living room, and I could tell it was getting a little intense. I warned my son. I said, you better take it easy on your sister. Do not make her cry. Well, things continue to escalate. He put her in a headlock or something, kind of crushed her face and hurt her and made her cry. He didn't injure her, but, whatever. It hurt her, so she starts crying. And I got upset. He's messing with my baby girl. And I warned him. And so I stepped in and said, oh, I warned you. You didn't listen. I'm going to give you a taste of your own medicine. So I put him in a headlock and squished him a little bit. He started to cry. So what did I do right there? I mean, even if you listen to my language, I'm giving him a taste of his own medicine. I was upset that he made one of my kids cry, so I made one of my kids cry. I just took it too far. I went way too far with the lion. Wasn't enough lamb. And I had to come back and apologize and make the situation right. I realized I just gone too far. And as fathers, it's easy for us to expect respect from our children, but it's completely unreasonable to expect our kids to respect us if we are not being respectable. And in that moment, I was not acting in a respectable way. I was lowering myself to my son's level instead of expecting my son to step up to my level. And so I had to go back and apologize. And there's tons of lessons in all that, but what's the lesson? I was just pushing it too hard. I was being too much of a lion, not enough of a lamb. In general, we'll talk about discipline in future podcasts, but definitely don't try to discipline or enforce things like that when you're high on emotions, when you're upset. And so I had to change my approach to expecting obedience from my kids. When tears start flying, I get a little upset that someone that hurt my daughter. My firstborn's a girl, and man, there's something special about that daddy-daughter connection. and it's easy for us to get a little overprotective, even among the siblings. So that was me not being enough lamb. Since then, I've learned how to tone it down and conduct myself in a respectable way so that my children actually have a valid reason to respect me. Lion, lamb, expect obedience. Obedient children make a happy family all the way around. Don't expect anything less, but give some grace there, right? Lion, high expectation. Lamb, you got to give grace because they're still children. They're still learning. They're still growing. And balancing all that is what intentional fathers do. So I hope this has been a good encouragement to you. Blessings on you and your family. May you have obedient and happy children. We'll catch you next time.